How y'all doing? I just want to start off by saying thank you for all the support you have given me over these past 5 years. It's been a huge help through prayers and through monetary support. Just all of that has just been so influential in my schooling and in my life. It's been a couple years since I've been up here in front of you. The first time I preached, I think I taught about the first and second, like the greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. You guys know that one, right? It's a pretty good topic, if I do say so myself. But just a little recap since then. I've graduated from college twice. The first time was from Central Christian College of the Bible. I got my bachelor's in youth and family ministries, and then I just graduated 2 days ago from Johnson University, Florida, where I got my master's of strategic ministry. And that was a great program. I mean, Central was great as well, but I mean, Johnson's so fresh, I'm going to talk about that for a little bit. I got the opportunity to work with this church called Real Life Christian Church. It's actually the 72nd largest church in the United States. It was a residency program, so just like when you think of a doctor working in a hospital while going to school, I was doing that. I was a full-time student while full-time youth minister at one of their campuses. And that was just such a great experience. I learned so much from them, just their ability to reach out to people and to connect with them and to share the gospel with them, and just have such an influence on people's lives. But the thing that really stuck out from this program that I was in was this class called Bible Lands and Lifeways, okay? And part of that class was I got to go to Israel. I got to spend 12 days in the Holy Land, and that was just an awesome experience. So much happened. I was able to see, like, the Sea of Galilee. I saw Jerusalem. I saw Nazareth, Bethlehem, you name it. I probably saw it or saw it out the window because Israel is actually really small. I'm not sure if y'all know that. It's like Rhode Island type, like really small. But yeah. But the thing that stuck out to me the most from this trip happened on the way to the city of Dan. And the city of Dan isn't something we really talk about on Sunday morning. It's just not something you talk about. But we're going to talk about it here tonight, okay? Because I got to give you some background into this place, this city that I was walking to, and this thing that happened that just sticks out to me so much, okay? So here's the background, the city of Dan. Way back, okay, you got to go back past Jesus, past King David, to the time of Joshua, okay? And Joshua and the Israelites just conquered the promised land, okay? They had just taken over this land that God had promised to them that he was giving to them, okay? And they had just split up the territories for each of the tribes. And if you look up there on the next slide, that circle there, that's Dan. That's the land that God gave to Dan for them to live in, that their tribe, the Danite tribe, okay? And if you look just to the south of that right there is called Philistia, okay? Or the Philistines, okay? That's where they lived. And if you know the Bible, the Old Testament, it seems like Israel was always fighting the Philistines, right? You got Deborah, and you got Samson. King David was even fighting them hundreds of years later. So, like, these guys just would not give up. And look at where Dan is, right? It's right there. So they're constantly getting attacked, right? And this just happened over and over and over again. It just got annoying. I mean, can you imagine? Just getting attacked all the time. It's not like you can just build a wall or something. You got to deal with it, right? So what they did, they elected 5 people from their tribe to scout out the land north of them to find a new place for them to live. They're going to leave the place that God gave them and go north, okay? So this story is from Judges 18, okay? So these 5 guys go north, and they go up through Ephraim, okay? Now in Ephraim, they get to the house of Micah, and this is not Micah, like the book of the Bible, Micah. This is some other dude named Micah, okay? And Micah has got these idols, okay? He's got these household idols that he and his family and his servants all worship. But he doesn't just have idols. He hired a Levite priest. And if you know, the Levites is a tribe that is dedicated to the worship of God, right? They travel around with the tabernacle, and they're there to just service God and be there for him. And the fact that Micah had a Levite was very confusing to these 5 Danites, okay? Like, why is this? That doesn't really make sense, but it's okay because it's a Levite. He's got to know what he's doing, right? When in actuality is, he doesn't, okay? He doesn't know. So they're there and they're like, hey, you're a Levite. Why don't you give us a blessing so that we can find this new place that we're trying to find, right? And the Levite, he's just like, yeah, okay, whatever. So he gives them a blessing. I mean, it's not really from God because he doesn't serve God, but he serves these idols. So these idols are giving them a blessing to find this new place. Okay, so the 5 scouts leave, and they keep going all the way up through Manasseh, up through Naphtali, up to this point at the very tippy top up there, where they found the city of Laish. Okay, Laish was a very old city. Like, it was around during the time of Abraham. So very, very old. And because the city is old, the people are kind of old. Okay, and yeah, there's they've all like spread out, moved away. But there were still some people living there, and this was actually a pretty good spot. There was some fresh water nearby. There was these natural springs coming out of the ground. There was a lot of vegetation because of that, and a lot of wildlife. So they're like, hey, this is a pretty good. This is a pretty good spot. So they think, hey, I'm going to go back home. I'm going to go all the way back to Dan, my area where God had actually given it to me. I'm going to go all the way back there and tell my friends and my family, hey, this new place has got it made, and it'd be really easy to take. And that's what they do. They go all the way back down to Dan. They gather up 600 of their friends and family members, and they decide to go and take Laish. Now, on their way, guess where they stopped? They stopped at Micah's house again. And because this Levite had blessed them and these idols had done something that worked, they said, hey, let's go ahead and take these and that Levite priest all the way back up to our new city, because they obviously worked, right? So that's what they did. They went all the way back up to Laish. They killed everyone there. They burned the city to the ground. They built a new city on top of it, and they named it Dan after their forefather. And Dan was not that good of a place, right? It was always an open rebellion against God. They set up these idols on top of an altar and sacrificed animals and humans to it. It was just not a good place. And when the kingdom of Israel separated, they were taken over by the Syrians. Everybody in the northern kingdom was just slaughtered and killed, okay? And the city of Dan was never heard from again, like the tribe of Dan. Even in Revelation, in chapter 7, when they're giving the list of the remaining tribes of Israel, Dan is not on the list. It is not there. Dan and its open rebellion against God had a lasting impact. So needless to say, this was a dark place, right? I didn't know it at the time, but this place I was going to was like, you could almost feel the evil, okay? Now I'm getting back to that story. That thing that I told you really stuck out to me from my trip to Israel, okay? We're on our way there, on the trail, and there was 22 of us, and at the head of the pack was our professor, okay? His name is Mark Zeese, a.k.a. Zeese the Beast, okay? And he's a really cool dude. He's basically Indiana Jones because he's an actual archaeologist, and he actually dug out some of Dan. Like, so he knows his stuff, okay? So we're walking up on this trail, going to Dan, and we get a ways up, and Zeus is in the front, and he sees this dog running down the trail towards him, okay? And he looks, and it's a golden retriever. So American instincts kick in, right? American dog, Air Bud, it's probably just off his leash, right? The closer it gets, he realized this is an Air Bud. It was a wild dog, okay? So it's running at us, and just like a good teacher, he shields the way. He tells us all, get back, and he gets in the way of this dog and runs at him. He's kicking at it, right? He's doing that thing, and it bites him on the leg. It bites him on the wrist. It jumps up to get him on the chest, and he grabs it by the throat, and he tackles it to the ground, and he holds it there. Luckily, these 2 rangers from the reserve there were walking down the trail, and they saw this happen, and one guy, really brave, he comes up and he climbs a tree, to stay away. The other guy walks around and he picks up this log from the ground and he lays it down across the neck of the dog and then stands on it to keep it pinned so that Zeus can finally stand back up. Okay? And then, it was a wild dog. It just bit somebody. They put it down. They put it out of its misery, right? And then they send the dog off to the lab and they send Zeus to the hospital. He was just bit by a dog. Of course he's going to the hospital. So the next day, Zeus gets a call from the lab, and the dog was rabid. For those of you who don't know, rabies is pretty intense, okay? If you show symptoms before you've been vaccinated, only 10 people have survived. So this was very scary, right? So they rushed Zeus off, and luckily, we just found out this past Wednesday that he's clean. After getting a battery of shots, like every other week, just a whole bunch of shots, he's fine, okay? So I can tell the story. Thanks, Zeus. I appreciate it. So this is a dark place, right? It's crazy, and all this stuff happening, and then knowing the history of Dan, it really got me thinking, what can I learn from Dan? Okay, what really just jumps out at me from this? Well, I'm pretty glad that I asked that, because there's a few things that really did jump out. And the first thing was that the city of Dan was obsessed with worship, okay? It just happened to be the wrong thing, okay? The people of Dan built a high place and set Micah's idols up on top of it and worshiped them for hundreds of years, for so long. This place was obsessed with worship, but it's not hard to notice that everything they worshiped was the wrong thing, right? Micah's idols were wrong. The high place was wrong. And there were other things that they worshiped that were just wrong. They were confused. They had these things as replacements for God because they thought, hey, remember that Levite priest that blessed us and we got to the top to find the city? They thought that was God. That they thought that was worth more worship than God was. And I think that we have the same tale, the same lie told to us today. It's just not as obvious as a high place with idols put on top, right? It's not quite as blatant, okay? But I think it takes the form of, say, sports teams, okay? When we're watching it and we're like, yeah, my team's on. Oh, we got this church gathering going on, but it's my team and it's their rival. It's the Cubs. You got to watch them lose, right? It takes our attention away from what actually matters, okay? And then for the younger crowd, we pray that people like our posts on Instagram or if you still use Facebook or Twitter, okay? But when we should actually be praying God and thanking Him for how much He values us already, that we don't even need to try and get other people to like us because He already loves us. And maybe the last one that I thought of was like secular music. Now, I'm not saying that that's entirely bad. I love rocking out to Bohemian Rhapsody, right? But when I go to church and I'm singing like How Great Thou Art or something like that is going to God, that's actually worthy of my praise, that's actually worthy of me singing out at my loudest, and the person in the row in front of me can't even hear me, is that really worship? Am I really worshiping where I need to be worshiping? It's a trick that all of us slip up for. Somewhere, we worship the wrong thing. So that was the first thing that jumped out to me. Okay, the second thing is kind of similar, not quite as obvious, okay? It's a little more abstract. It's that the city of Dan was not only obsessed with worshiping other things, they were obsessed with setting up other places to worship God. They were confused about where God actually lived. Okay, they thought that God lived within the idols, right? But God at that time actually lived within the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant, right? That the Levites were carrying around. That is where God actually lived. That's where He resided. And then the same story is told again. Remember when I said that Israel had split into two kingdoms? Well, that was with Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Okay, Rehoboam was the king of Judah. That was the good kingdom. Then Jeroboam was the king of Israel, and that was kind of a bad kingdom, okay? And what Jeroboam did, because he knew that, hey, God lived in the temple. At this time, the temple was built, and God lived in the temple with the Ark of the Covenant, right? That's where God resided. He knew that, and so he was like, we can't have that. We can't have the people of my kingdom going down all the way to Jerusalem, worshiping God because God is actually there and not coming back home. I can't have that. My kingdom would go, right? I'd be killed. And that's just, and what he does instead is he sets up these two golden calves. Okay, he thinks back all the way back to where the Israelites had just left Egypt and they had gone to Mount Sinai and they built this calf while Moses was up on top of it. Remember that story? And they started worshiping that. He was like, oh, hey, that worked then. Let's do that again. That way they won't leave. So they set one up in Bethel and they set one up in the city of Dan, the city notorious for worshiping false gods. They were obsessed with setting up places and saying that God resided there when he didn't. And I think that we have the same problem today. Okay? And I think that it's the church. Now don't panic, okay? I'm not a heretic. Please don't stone me, okay? Let me explain. I believe that we have been told a lie, okay? When you think back to when you told somebody where you're going today. Like, hey, what are you doing tonight? Oh, I'm going to church, right? What did you mean by that? See, in the Bible, everywhere you see the word church, it's not actually the word church. It's actually the word, in Greek it's called ecclesia, okay? Which means a congregation, a gathering, an assembly, okay? A people, okay? It's not a fixed place. It's not a building. So actually the word church comes from the German, which means house of the Lord. So it's not, the translation is just not quite right. It doesn't convey the same meaning. So in Matthew 16, when Jesus is talking about the church, when he says about Peter, upon this rock I will build my church, he's not actually saying that. He's saying, upon this rock I will build my congregation, I will build my gathering, I will build my people, I will build my ecclesia. Okay? The rock that he was referring to was not an actual rock, it was Peter, it was a person. And similarly, ladies and gentlemen, the church building is not God's family, it's not his ecclesia. It's not where God resides, just like the high place wasn't, just like the golden calves weren't. God resides within us. 1 Corinthians 3:16 says, don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst? It's kind of funny because Sherm shared that verse this morning too. I thought he was going to steal my whole message. But it doesn't get much more blatant than that, right? N.T. Wright, a Christian scholar whose books I've had to read so many of, he writes in Simply Christian, those in whom the Spirit comes to live are God's new temple. They are individually and corporately places where heaven and earth meet. God resides within us, not in a building, not in this structure that we are gathered in. God left the temple when when the Babylonians captured it. Okay, the Ark of the Covenant was no longer in there. So when the veil tore during the crucifixion, that was showing, hey, he's not actually here. You guys have been worshiping somewhere where God does not reside. Okay? God resides within us, within his assembly, within his congregation, within his ecclesia. It is with this in mind that we are called to be witnesses to the world. We are the place where God resides, and he is not supposed to be fixed to the ground and immovable. We are an ecclesia on the move. People to church. We are not inviting them to a building. We're inviting them to a congregation, a gathering. We are not inviting them to experience the Sunday morning thing. We're inviting them to a lifestyle that really starts on Monday and ends on Sunday. We are not inviting them to come with an individual, with me. No. We are inviting them to come and meet the family. The family that loves deeply, that does not judge for your past mistakes, but helps walk you towards a brighter future. a family that shows what it looks like to have God live within us. How that changes your life. How that inspires you. How it gives you a sense of belonging. How it gives you a sense of purpose. I know the whole purpose of an ordination is to give me, the candidate, a charge to do work in God's service. But if it's okay with you, I would like to give you one as well. And I hope it is, because it's not actually mine, it's Jesus's. So he's kind of the Son of God. The charge is this: therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to see that rabid, mangy dog running down that trail that we call Satan. Step in his way, in front of your coworkers, in front of your neighbors, in front of your family members, and catch him by the throat and tackle him to the ground and put him out of his misery. And the only way to do that is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. We must do the opposite of what the tribe of Dan did. We must worship the one true God. We must be his temple. We must be his ecclesia. Thank you.